Hello, dear community, and very welcome to our next innovation talk. It is my really big pleasure to welcome John Cumbers from California this morning. Obviously, it's morning in California, to talk with us about such things as eternal life. John, very welcome, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for having me.
John, one of the super exciting speakers of the upcoming Spin-off Austria conference, will be very happy to welcome you there as well, and to kind of talk about the topics that maybe will be discussed there as well. I'd like to start by introducing you. Synthetic biology networker, founder and investor, space bioengineer, and Wikipedia says that you're founder and chief executive officer of SynBioBeta, which promotes synthetic biology to build a more sustainable universe. Strong topic of the future. Now let me start by asking a very concrete, very particular question, as I saw one video of you, which you start by saying that at 24 years of age, you decided you wanted to live forever. Now let me ask you, how far have you come? Is there a solution to that issue?
Well, I think that I'm doing okay. I'm 42 years of age right now, and I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. So even if I'm not able to live forever, just the whole process of procreation, I now understand when you share half the DNA with an offspring, you can live vicariously through the lives of others. So time will tell whether we've managed to reverse aging in my lifetime, but there's always this backup of having 2 children in case I don't.
You know, the question is very serious, actually, and you've been researching and working in the field of synthetic biology. Can you explain us what is this about and what kind of future can it determine for us? What kind of impact can it have on our future?
Happy to. Synthetic biology is about reading, writing, and editing of DNA and designing and building and testing of biological systems that are going to perform some function or perform some application. And over the last 20 years, this field has grown from nothing into now we're predicting over $30 billion will be invested in the field by venture capitalists. And if you go back 10 years ago, when I founded SynBioBeta, there was just $250 million a year being invested into the industry. So synthetic biology is taking on the problem and taking on the challenge of trying to make biology easier to engineer. You could say, well, biology has been engineered for the last 50 years since we discovered DNA, but there's a difference between tinkering around and a true engineering discipline. And many of the advances that we see technologically these days are from software engineering or electronic engineering. It takes time for a true engineering discipline to emerge. And that's what's happening now with biology, is that it's turning from an artisanal science into an engineered discipline. And that is the field of synthetic biology.
Do you think that the market will keep on growing from where it is now as well?
Absolutely. I'm predicting that the next 100 years is going to be the century of biology. And I think we're still at the stage of the 1960s if we compare biology to the computer revolution. So there's plenty of room at the top. You can see now the trillion-dollar companies that are all software companies. The majority of them are software companies or hardware companies with a electronic base to them. And I think we're just seeing now the fruits of the computer industry blossom. So I think there's still 100 years to go in biology.
Can you give us some insights on the impact of this technology and this field on our lives? Is it, let's call it, about eternal life, or are there many other broader applications to our future?
Many people are passionate about using biotechnology to cure disease, because disease is one of the most debilitating things that we have around us. And disease is caused by biology, but disease can also be cured by biology. One of the most promising advances in cancer therapy is called CAR-T therapy. And CAR-T therapies are therapies that are personalized to you and the cancer that you have. So if you have cancer, if you're unlucky enough to be diagnosed with cancer, you can now take a sample of the cancer, you can sequence the DNA of the cancer cells. You can find out what's different about the cancer cell DNA to the regular DNA that you have. And then you can design a personalized medicine. You can actually engineer your own immune system to fight the cancer that's in your body. So you're using biology to fight biology. And that's one of the most promising advances. That's not directly looking at the problem of aging, but it is directly looking at the biggest killer around, which is cancer. So if you start knocking out the biggest killers, then you will be prolonging people's lifespan.
On the other hand, since the global climate conference is taking place right now, and for example, agriculture is a strong field where we have a strong methane emissions from maybe cows and so on and so forth, we'll be able to produce, let's call it synthetic meats. You have some very cool startups in America, in the United States of America, and especially San Francisco, that are dealing with this topic. Is this also where this biology is coming into effect?
Absolutely. So one of the companies, Impossible Foods, I'm friends with the CEO, Pat Brown, and he's actually going to be speaking at our conference in the Bay Area in January. The reason that he started Impossible Foods is because of the impact that it can have on climate change. And if you look at the disastrous record that livestock has on the climate in terms of the amount of water, the amount of energy, and the amount of methane emissions. So what Impossible Food has done is a miracle of biotechnology. They've gone out into nature and they've searched for things that act like meat. And one of the things that they found was the humble beetroot. Well, what relationship does beetroot have to meat? Well, they're both red color. The reason that they're red color is because of a special protein called heme, which happens to bind iron, which is what makes your blood red. It's also what makes beetroot red. Now, it turns out that when you bite into heme, you get that slightly bloody flavor. And so what Pat and his colleagues at Impossible Food did was to take the DNA from the beetroot protein to put it into a yeast cell. And now that yeast cell is normally used for brewing beer. But now what the yeast can do is to convert sugar. Instead of converting it into alcohol, they can convert sugar into heme protein. And that is the magic ingredient that makes the Impossible Burger bleed.
Are we talking about science fiction in 100 years, or are these use cases reality in the near future as well?
I love to talk about science fiction and what's happening in the next 100 years, but these things, those two examples that I gave you of the cancer-fighting immune cells and the meat that bleeds, that's not made of meat, are on the market today.
Amazing. In one of your videos, you mentioned the topic of genetically modified food, let's call it that way. And I think in your early days, back in England, you were even protesting against GMO. Now you have a different point on that, since I think it's combined with the topic of synthetic biology. What's your current opinion on the GMO?
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I was sitting in a field protesting GMO plants in England, where I grew up. Fast forward 8 years, and I'm now at university learning about these technologies, and I changed my mind. The reason I changed my mind is because I saw GMOs are a tool and a technology, just like fire, just like electricity, just like chemistry. You can do bad things with fire, electricity, and chemistry, but look at the good things that you can do in the world with fire to keep us warm, or electricity to power this Zoom call that we're having, or chemistry to make products that we wouldn't otherwise be able to make. So I think you need to look rationally at any technology, and you can say, how am I going to apply this technology? And those two examples that I gave you about cancer and food are two great ways to apply the technology to improve people's lives, improve their healthcare, and to make food that isn't so dangerous in terms of climate change on the environment. So I think there's a lot of different applications that you can apply these tools to, and that would be where my thinking goes, is what is the application and how do I want to apply this tool?
At the conference, or at least in the video that I was able to see, you kind of told the audience this will affect all of you here. Now, I wasn't able to see how old this audience there was, but who is this going to affect? Is this going to affect the young generation, or is it also relevant to, let's say, people who are retired already and maybe above 60 years old?
I think in terms of health span and lifespan, it's definitely going to affect people who are in their later years. I think for the large percentage of the population who are currently working, if they're in the manufacturing business, in the business of making things, then I think biology is going to sweep through and disrupt manufacturing industries globally. It's going to affect supply chains. It's going to affect sustainability. It's going to be promoted because of its climate, because of the way that you can manufacture using CO2 instead of fossil fuels. So I think there's a huge impact that it's going to have on existing businesses in terms of disruption. And then on the next generation, I always tell young people, if you want a job, go study computing. But if you want a career, then go study biology. So I think the future is bright and the future is out there for people to take careers in bioengineering.
Amazing. Now, let's help us understand one thing, since you're going to be talking at the Spin-off Austria conference as well. We are kind of in the current situation in Austria where we want to increase the spin-offs from the universities. We want scientists to be kind of incentivized to found companies out of their ideas. What kind of role does science play in this future that you're telling us here? Is this future going to be built by corporates and by startups, or is there a role for science as well?
That's a great question, because right now, all over the world, young people want to found companies. They want to start startups. And the most obvious place to start a startup is in the software or internet or mobile app world. It's easy to do, it's cheap. You can start a company without much capital. And that's really good. I'm glad that the computer industry has matured to a place where that's possible. It's getting that way for the biotech industry as well. You can start a biotech company on relatively small amounts of money, a few $100,000 to start. So it's still much more than a software startup, but it's still a significant amount of capital. If you go back to the universities and where the technologies are coming from, the CAR-T technology that I mentioned was discovered from basic science at the university. The recombinant technology that I mentioned for producing the heme protein in the Impossible Burger came out of Stanford originally. So you need the basic research to happen at the university so that it can then translate out into industry. And that happened in tech as well. Look at Google, look at Sun Microsystems. That's why Stanford is such a rich university, because of its endowment, because it kept, I think, just 1 or 2% of the value of Sun Microsystems and Google. But because they were spinouts from the university endowment grows. So it's this amazing ecosystem of basic research being funded by the government, spinouts being spun out from the university into companies. And then one of Stanford's biggest assets, and I think one of Austria's biggest assets, are the young people who want to go change the world. They want to get rich, they want to start companies, and they want to have an impact with their lives.
And what do you guys do to motivate these people that are at the universities, that are researchers, scientists, to then actually build a company? Just help us maybe with 1 or 2 ideas to understand how can we encourage them as well to go the path of the entrepreneurship and not only to stay in the academia.
One really good program that started out of the Bay Area, it was started by Steve Blank and Jerry Engel, they're 2 friends of mine, is called the Lean Startup Program. And the Lean Startup Program was something that they ran as a course at University of California, San Francisco, particularly for biotech. And they've also spun it out to the National Science Foundation. So the National Science Foundation, which funds universities to do research, also has something called the I-Corps Innovation Program. And in that I-Corps Innovation Program, they can, people who have got funding for doing a research project can also get additional funding and this program to go commercialize their research. And that focuses on getting outside of the building, going and talking with potential customers and building up a business model canvas and a hypothesis for your startup. So you treat your startup much like you treat your science project in the lab. You are hypothesizing, who is my customer? What is their problem? What is the channel? What is their pain? How am I going to go to market? So it's treating the startup creation process as a science project. And I think that's one of the great programs that the US has created. And Stanford does it, Berkeley does it, Harvard does it. A lot of universities are doing this I-Corps program to get research spun out into companies.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll have deep dives on that on the 23rd of November at the Spin of Austria conference. You're all welcome to join us as well. Maybe on the final, one final question, John. We also see there's a lot of capital in the market, which is on the one side very, very good because investments are growing, also probably in biotech companies. On the other hand, I've heard that there's a trend of big tech companies insourcing the science, so employing the scientists that will usually do their project at the university. Do you see a threat there for the future scientific research at the universities?
There is definitely a threat. If you look at China and how much they are investing in science and technologies, I think it's predicted to overtake the US and EU next year. And it would have overtaken us had it not been for COVID. And so what you're seeing is China is leaping ahead with science and technology. The US, unfortunately, has pulled back and is investing less, and Europe is somewhere in the middle. So I think it's really important that we continue to invest in basic science and technologies. What has picked up the slack of our lack of investment are companies that are investing or investors that are investing. Two of my friends turned down tenure track positions, one at UCLA and one at MIT, in order to fund and start their own companies. That would have been unheard of about 5 years ago, but now that is starting to happen. So the danger is that academia and being a professor becomes not an attractive career option, because then when you don't get the best people going into academia, you don't get the best professors starting labs, then you don't get the best people teaching the next generation. So there's definitely a warning bell to be had. Let's not get complacent. Let's continue to invest in basic science, because from basic science is where the technologies like the CAR-T cancer technology came from, or the recombinant technology for the heme protein. If we cut out the basic science, it's a short-term gain and we will lose the long-term advantage. And not just the US, but globally, Europe and China, everybody should continue to invest in basic research.
These are super valuable insights. I'd maybe like to close with my first question. Let's come back to the research around the internal life. Do you think the answer will be found within the synthetic biology?
I think that, yes, the answer for living forever will be found at some point from synthetic biology, from our ability to engineer biological systems. I think that the future will be a very interesting place. I don't know when we will be living forever, whether it will be in 50 years' time or 500 years' time or 5,000 years' time, but I do believe that we will at some point, because of the advances in technology and the advances in pharmaceutical production and the ability to engineer biology.
John, eternal life is the one thing, but understanding aging of people currently could be the step before that. And I think you started a new startup on that topic. Could you give us some insights on that?
I'm happy to. Yes. One of the biggest questions that we have in the universe is why we age. And we're nowhere really near to understanding that or understanding how we can deal with that problem. And for the last 20 years, I've been thinking about the meta problem, which is how we learn and how we consume and transfer information between people. Isn't it ridiculous that in this digital world, you don't have a map of what you know and what you don't? So what I imagined was being able to look down at Wikipedia and type in aging, and it could show, here are all the topics on aging. Here's everything that you know, highlighted in green. Here's everything that you don't know, highlighted in red. And then here's a way to navigate through each of the topics so that you can master any topic on Wikipedia that you want to master. And as you go through the topics, you can be connected with other people who have complementary knowledge to you. So we called the new startup LALTAL, Learn a Little, Teach a Little, LALTAL. And we're in beta right now. People are welcome to go to the website and sign up. And the whole goal is that we can answer some of the biggest questions in the universe, starting off with why we age.
What is the answer? Do you have an idea what is the answer? And is it hidden again, or the answer will come by means of or with the help of synthetic biology?
I think there are a number of hypotheses about why we age, and a lot of them focus on the degradation of the cell and the building up of junk in the cell over time. But really, the complexity comes down to a lot of feedback loops within biology, a feedback loop around insulin and glucose, and when you're hungry and when you eat and when you exercise is one good feedback loop. We can see that when that feedback loop gets out of whack, we have metabolic syndrome or we have diabetes. The same thing is true for a lot of the repair functions inside of cells, that if we have a system that goes around and doesn't repair the cells in time, or it gets out of whack as you get older, then that will cause aging. So I think there's a lot of clues there, but and a lot of brain power working on it, but there's no real knowledge base that's bringing together all of that brain power. And that's the problem that we hope to solve.
For the founders that are watching us, would you say that this is a good field to start a business in the future?
I think that, broadly speaking, aging is a very exciting field to start a business in the future. There's a lot of tech billionaires who want to live forever, from Larry Ellison, from Oracle to Bill Gates from Microsoft. A lot of them are betting on biotechnology, and a lot of them have an interest in aging. And you could say, well, the aging, that's just for the rich billionaires. And sure, it will be for the rich billionaires at the beginning, but so was driving a car or flying a plane. And now those things are affordable to everybody. So I think the future is very bright for humanity that can live as long as we want to.
Perfect. Thank you, John. On that note, thank you for your time, and thank you, dear audience, for being with us. Come join us on the 23rd of November at the Spin of Austria conference. Thank you and goodbye.